Well, Facebook shares are up in extended trade after the social media giant saw revenue miss expectations, but user growth across all its services coming in better than feared. Let's discuss this with Alex Moazed, who's the CEO of Applico. So, Alex, you've got to look at this, I think, in the context of what we saw revealed in the Facebook papers as well, right? They're worried about Snap, they're worried about TikTok. Their own data shows that new users in the younger demographic are not coming through the way that they used to. So, is the writing on the wall when it comes to future growth?
Facebook's in a tough spot. Sheryl said it in the earnings release today. Zuckerberg said the same thing. They need to focus on younger users, but they can't use M&A like they have in the past, right? With Instagram or WhatsApp as amazing M&A examples. Now, because of the antitrust scrutiny that's been ratcheted up on Facebook, not just in the US, but around the world, they're in a much tighter spot. They have to kind of self-innovate themselves out of this predicament, and that's much harder for them to execute on at the size and scale that they are today.
So what does that so-called metaverse look like that they're working on if they are, as you say, hampered from being able to do this kind of M&A?
Yeah, I mean, if they didn't have the hamstrings on them, so, their Giphy acquisition for $400 million, they just got a $70 million fine put on them for a $400 million acquisition, which should have closed months ago, right? But that small, seemingly inconsequential deal has been held up and has just gone through the rigmarole. So, for example, if Facebook wanted to go buy Roblox, for example, which if I'm Zuckerberg trying to do the Metaverse, Roblox is a no-brainer of an acquisition target, but they can't do it. So Zuckerberg has literally had to reorg the entire company to try and now allow for this innovation to be executed upon from internally. So the reorg from Zuckerberg's daily involvement, it's going to be a pretty heavy toll. Go ahead.
So in terms of all the latest stories, coming out of these papers where that Bloomberg, among 16 other major news organizations, were able to get these documents, pour through them, and find what many people consider more damning evidence against Facebook's ability and commitment to removing what many people say is hateful or dangerous material from their platform. Is that damning for Facebook? Seems like a lot of investors maybe don't care.
It's damning for the reasons you wouldn't expect. It's damning because the more censorship that Facebook does, it not only adds costs to the platform, but it also scares users away, both creators and users and audience, right? It's a huge strategic blind spot for Facebook because they're so aggressive already on the censorship. Continuing to ratchet that up is a huge strategic blunder, in my opinion, for them. So these papers, although seemingly from a whistleblower, I think there's a lot more to really understand why these were put out. What is the end result that Facebook really needs? I actually think it needs less censorship, not more, and it's creating other tech competitors. It's giving them users in droves, and tens of millions of users are leaving to these alternative social networks. That's a huge problem.
So what's the answer to the problem, Alex? And, we have Donald Trump getting ready to start his social media empire and challenge these other social media apps.
He's just one of many. This Rumble, it's a kind of a YouTube video sharing competitor. Peter Thiel just invested in Rumble a few months ago. Peter Thiel, a famous investor for investing in what? Yes, Facebook, right? So there are a lot of motions and competitors at work here. TikTok being on the other side of this spectrum, right? How does Facebook combat a large multi-billion-dollar tech competitor like a TikTok? I think over the next few years, Facebook, not to mention then the Apple privacy headwinds, which they spoke about in the earnings, I think Facebook's going to have a very difficult challenge keeping up with the level of investor expectations. Doesn't mean they can't grow a great business and generate a lot of profit, but will it meet the level of investor expectation? I think that's going to be an uphill battle for Zuckerberg and Sheryl to overcome. Hence the $50 billion buyback, right?
Right. From an advertising perspective, who do they need to worry about the most?
What's interesting is that, Facebook has enjoyed a monopoly amongst its social media advertising competitors. Google has split it with Facebook as a duopoly over all digital advertising. Amazon's the number 3. But Amazon's come into the advertising space from a completely different e-commerce angle, which interestingly we saw PayPal rumored to look at buying Pinterest, right? There's a lot of advertising opportunity when you bring e-commerce into this, and how do you close the loop by selling products? Something that Instagram has been making some progress on, but albeit maybe a little bit slower than they would have liked so far.
Alex, great to have you as always. Alex Moazed, CEO of Applico, there on Facebook and tech earnings.